Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Long Road Back. It's a podcast designed to show the parts of injury recovery that people don't normally talk about, to give athletes a voice, to explore identity, mental health, guilt, and ultimately to make people who are in their similar position in their recovery journey feel inspired and feel less alone. So today I'm very, very excited to say I'm joined by someone who came through the Team Bath netball pathway from under 17s, under 19s, and under 21s. Actually signed her first senior Super League contract in 2018. Actually continued with the club for 4 years and actually was selected for England under 21s during that period. Eventually transferred to the Cardiff Dragons in her last year of university, where she was actually scouted for the England Future Roses teams, where she played international fixtures against the likes of South Africa. Currently living in London and playing for London Mavericks Next Gen and actually balancing quite an impressive work and netball life balance. I'm sure we'll come on to that. And also played against Australia for the England mixed senior team as well. So I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Hannah Passmore today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's lovely to come on and chat all things injuries and recovery.
Awesome, yeah. It's not the most glamorous topic in the world, is it? But it's definitely worth talking about. So it's honestly, it's really quite an impressive kind of CV there. And I think I'd love to hear from you, kind of your journey with netball, and then kind of whether there's anything there that kind of stands out. Because I must admit that England, I remember actually seeing the England Future Roses team is quite an impressive thing to be selected for.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've had a very similar journey to a lot of netballers. I think netball is quite a linear process. You kind of go through the pathways and you kind of progress up and you try and kind of improve year on year. I was really lucky to when I moved and I was living around Bath, I was very lucky to kind of play for their age group team and got selected and scouted for their Super League team, which back in the day I was actually the youngest in the team and the first of the millennial to actually be with a contract that year. So it was a really cool and exciting experience for me. I was still doing my A-levels at school, so it was a lot of traveling for kind of originally my mum and dad and then me once I was driving. So it was a big commitment back in the day, but I honestly loved it and it was such a cool experience. We trained at the University of Bath, which led me to later on want to actually go to university there because it was just such a cool facility and just my kind of environment and kind of idea of university there was just so cool, and training there every day was something that was such a privilege. I kind of continued to play throughout uni. I played at Bath for 5 years, and then within that got kind of into the under 21s England team, which was such a cool experience as well. It was my first kind of step into the England team. It's quite hard as an age group to kind of break into it. So you kind of trial and then there's a lot of different fitness tests. There's a lot of different kind of categories that you have to hit. So it was a really cool experience that year to get in. I ended up getting injured kind of during that time. So I missed out on a couple of competitions and then kind of fell out of the kind of pathway a little bit that year. But I'm sure we'll go more into all of that in a minute. And then transferred over to Cardiff for my final year of uni, just because it was a different team. They had kind of a lower rating in the league that year, and I wanted to go for more court time and experience and exposure, something different. I'd grown up at Bath, I'd done 5 years there, so it was something different to do, and I absolutely loved my time there. It was amazing, the culture, the environment, the nights out. Cardiff is amazing. It's really good fun, so really enjoyed that, and just something different. We had a coach from Australia that came over for the year that coached us, and a bunch of the girls we had a few Welsh girls, we had a few Australians. So it was a really cool experience. And because of that move, I started to get a lot more court time. I started to start my first game. I remember it was amazing. We were in a kind of open season opener venue, central venue, and I came on in half time and got player of the match that year.
I thought you got player of the match that game. Yeah.
Yeah, so I opened. That was kind of like, oh great, this is a good move. It's doing well. And then I got team of the week that week, and then the next week we played Manchester Thunder. Where I played the whole game, shot 100%, got team of the week again. So it was a really great kind of start to the season, and it was an amazing kind of like, oh wow, okay, I've made the right decision. And then I also then got into England Futures that year. So I got selected, and this one wasn't a trial situation. The pathway is more of a trial. This one was a selection, and they watch your games, and then they choose you based off that. And then through that, I then did a lot of summer camps and camps throughout work as well, which is kind of like a Monday to Wednesday. And you go and you stay up in Loughborough and you train and you play and you gym and you recover and all up there. So it was a lot to juggle with work. They were great with it as well, but yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing to kind of manage, traveling up to Loughborough every few days.
Yeah.
But it was amazing experience, and like you said in the intro, I had a lot of really cool international exposure, playing against different teams and all of that. And then it takes me to now where I'm in London living, and I've just joined a new team called London Mavericks. So juggling that and playing for their team this year.
Oh wow. Well, it's amazing. I think one thing that stood out to me there on like a personal level is it's amazing how sometimes a change of scenery can have such a big impact. I think it's amazing how it happens so much. I see it more in my own sport, obviously rugby, but I think it's definitely something I've like as you said, netball, and I think you can see it across so many sports. Sometimes a simple change of scenery can make the world of difference. I think whether that's players that want to simply want more game time, whether it's players who want to fall back in love with the sport, I think a change of scenery is so important. And it's obviously great to hear, 2 team of the weeks in a row is pretty impressive. So
Yeah,
pleased.
definitely. And I
So
think it
that's
is. I think sometimes you kind of want to have something slightly different. You get kind of comfortable. Obviously, I've been at Bath for 5 years. I was at uni there. It was easy. I literally lived in Bath, but you kind of sometimes you've got to step out your comfort zone a bit and take a leap and be a bit more have more mature decisions. Yeah, it's.
spot on. Well, you definitely got rewarded for kind of taking that step as well, which I think
Yes.
is really, obviously really inspiring for a lot of people to see as well. So just kind of shifting the focus there. And you mentioned obviously, missing out on things. That's definitely something I think that would be really worth touching on. But kind of before we
Mm.
get to there, in a more broad sense, would you be able to kind of paint me a picture of kind of your relationship with injury? I understand it's a very, very broad question. I think
Mhm.
I'd be interested to kind of hear, and maybe your first kind of interaction with what injury meant when you were younger, maybe when you're in under 17s, 19s kind of thing, and then stretching forward to where you are now in your career and kind of what injury means to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think throughout my kind of younger years, I was more lucky to say with injuries. I think I never had a season-ending injury for kind of my younger years growing up. In netball, there's always kind of ankles, knees. That's such a common thing, and there were so many girls getting ACL or meniscus injuries kind of throughout their youth. And I was lucky that I had quite a lot of rolled, sprained ankles, which set me back kind of 3 weeks max, where you kind of have a swollen ankle, you go home, you rest it, you ice it. But I think my kind of younger years, I was very kind of lucky with kind of avoiding that. I had very weak ankles and I got a lot of little ankle injuries here and there. So I had to rehab a lot, and do a kind of like a bit more proactive kind of in the gym, things like that. We had a lot of physio programs and they were very kind of structured around that as well, just because of kind of, especially in female sports, kind of knee injuries, that was just a huge thing. So we were lucky that there was a big kind of push and emphasis on making sure that you're okay, and things like taping. I spent my life in tape. Like every day before training, we'd all tape our ankles. We'd all have ankle supports, things like that. And you'd make sure you kind of watch that. But then, yeah, as I kind of progressed a little bit on, started to get a few more. So I think with injuries, I think I kind of just became immune to it. You just, because you roll your ankle so many times, or
Yeah.
you've done this, that it's so commonplace in netball that it's bound to happen, and you kind of think, oh well, there's another. You never really went a season without having some sort of injury, but also having someone surrounding you or around you that's also had something. So I think you kind of were surrounded by it, but it's not until you then actually have such a catastrophic or season-ending injury, which becomes then kind of a permanent part of your life, because even though you have kind of recovered from it, you still, A, it's weaker, or B, still in pain. Like I still get a chunky ankle every time I run. It still causes me so many issues. Same with my knee, sort of things like that which I then did when I was in Cardiff. So it just kind of continues through. So although you kind of are around it and you kind of have a bit more of a idea about it when you're younger, it does, once you've actually then had one, it does kind of stay with you.
I completely agree, and I think you touched on so many interesting themes there that I think one of them that stood out to me was that I can definitely understand this. It's the idea that you're in the team and you can see other people having these injuries, and there's a little bit of you, I imagine, that like, and I remember I felt it's almost selfish. Like, oh, but like hopefully it won't happen to me, and
Yeah,
it's not selfish because it's obviously you want to make sure you're okay and looking after yourself. But I think it's so interesting, and then when it does happen to you, it's like wow, it's almost like one of those scenes in film when you kind of like zone out,
yeah,
um, and I think that's really interesting and. kind of love to hear, you mentioned that your ankle there, and I obviously mentioned your knee as well. We're really interested to hear where there was maybe one injury that really stood out to you, and then kind of, I'd love to kind of run through your thoughts of what happened when in the moment when it happened, because obviously I can imagine it comes under that umbrella of, oh wow, it's actually happened to me now.
Yeah, yeah. I think my ankle was probably the biggest injury I've ever had, and probably still to this day, even with the knee. I had obviously had kind of like a good journey in netball. Like I said, you kind of progress through, and I think I then was so excited. Obviously, moved to university. First year was kind of COVID time, so we were training. Like obviously, we were still playing. We were going with our little COVID tests and everything, and we were really in a fortunate position where with netball and kind of the professionalization of it, we were able to continue to train and play. But I missed out on kind of the university netball aspect. So I think that was one thing I was really excited for going into my second year. Which within my first game, I got injured. So I kind of literally within the first 5 minutes, injury happened. We were playing against Cardiff Met and landed on one of the girls' foot, and my ankle just snapped. I went down, and I think that was the first moment where I was just in utter shock at the fact that I then couldn't walk, because you always have an ankle injury, you roll it, you kind of walk it off, you shake it off, and you kind of wonder. And I think, especially for me, who's always been kind of quite a tough person, I've got a very high pain threshold, and I'm also kind of, I don't like to show kind of pain or fear or any kind of vulnerability. So that was a really shocking moment for me, especially having a little bit more of a profile in uni netball. Kind of a lot of eyes were on me, and having to kind of hobble off and be in an environment where kind of all my friends were playing. So I kind of had to hobble off onto the side, kind of pretend I was fine. A few tears were shed. And then it was after the game where I then realized, took my sock off and thought, okay, something bad's happened. And in that moment, you kind of panic and you think, oh gosh, now what do I do? I've got to get to the hospital. I drove to uni. Everyone else is kind of excited. They've just won their first Bucks game, everything like that. And at this moment, I had got into England. Like there was a lot more riding on this than just my Bucks game. And I think another thing was sad was this was my first kind of Bucks season. I was then going to be on placement year. So I was like, then I'm only going to have kind of one Bucks season left. So you kind of start spiraling and thinking different things. And I think it was kind of that where you kind of think, oh gosh, I've got a contract. I'm in England. I've been paid to play right now. So I've now done this in an environment which wasn't what I'm being paid for. So you kind of start panicking, and it's then those conversations that you've got to phone your coach up, you've got to go to the hospital, you've got to go and check. And my housemates were brilliant and really lovely, and they all came and took me to the hospital, went and got an X-ray. And I ironically went to hospital, got an X-ray. They were like, "You're fine. Here's some crutches. Walk it off. You'll be fine." I couldn't then walk or anything, so ended up going to the physio in Bath, which I was really lucky to have. And they kind of came and were like, "This doesn't look okay. We're going to have to go and get this sorted." So luckily, my dad also is in diagnostics, so he runs a diagnostics hospital. So sorted me out really quickly. Went and got an MRI. And through all the swelling and bruising and everything, they realized that I had actually snapped 4 of my ligaments. One of them fully back off itself in half. The rest of them had snapped. So technically, I think there was only 1 left. So again, it's just, you become so panicked. You get these results, you go and speak to these people, and then your kind of heart sinks once you get that, because there's so much else riding on it as well. It wasn't just, oh, I'm out for the season. Now there's so many other teams to tell, so many other people to tell, and you kind of, there's a feeling of like you've let people down, you've let your coaches down, a feeling of I'm going to miss out on opportunities, which I then did. Like I missed out on playing Jamaica that year with England. So you kind of think, oh gosh, and netball's such a young sport as well. There's obviously a lot of people playing when they're kind of 30s, but being a female, you are at some point going to retire and have a kid and things like that. So you really want your younger years to be where you like make a name for yourself and thrive. And so you kind of start to panic about, oh, well, now if I'm out for a year, I'm then going to have to work my way back in and things like that. So I think that was like one of the biggest and worst kind of moments that I've had in my career. And then, yeah, obviously the rehab and everything just becomes hideous, and you go through the conversations of, are you going to have surgery? Are you going to do it the conservative way? You kind of speak to, obviously everyone in netball's had an injury, so you'll find the people that have had the same injury and you speak to them, and everyone's had a different experience. So you don't really know what
Yeah.
you're wanting to do. And I think I found it difficult going to different, I went to 4 different consultants, and I got 4 different answers. And another thing that I was kind of told to think about was, well, when you're older, they wanted to put a brace in my ankle because it had snapped so badly. They were like, okay, well, if you have a brace, that will stiffen your ankle. So when you're older and you have kids and you want to run around, or if you want to continue to play netball for more than 5 years, that's going to inhibit you and stop you running as much. And that was something that I was like, definitely not. That's not a solution. But then, okay, you're going to have to rehab. And I ended up going the conservative route because I thought I was young enough and fit enough to be able to recover from this myself. But then again, you end up having issues that other people who had surgery don't have. So it kind of stays with you for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's honestly, such an honest reflection. I think the two things that really stood out to me. The first one was, and I will come on to this in a second, was that diagnosis, that period of time between where it's happened and you haven't quite got that diagnosis, and people telling you to be fine. And I think that's something that so many people can resonate with. It's something I can resonate. And actually, your trip to the hospital mirrors my
Mm,
trip to the ER in Australia, where I was told it was fine. I was told, oh, the
yeah.
X-ray was okay, but obviously, as a soft tissue damage, ironically, can be so much worse if it doesn't show
Mm,
up. And I think obviously that's
yeah.
something I will touch on in a second. I think the first thing what really stood out to me was that feelings of guilt that you had there, and you said that you feel like you're letting people down, and that in the moment, as you said, there may be some tears at the start, but in the moment, you're surrounded by your teammates. It's maybe putting on a bit of a brave face. I'm really kind of interested to hear that how you felt when, because it all happens very quickly when the game stops, people disperse, and suddenly you're on your own. And I
Mm.
think I think I'm really interested to kind of maybe hear, was there any like low point in that section there where you suddenly realize, wow, I'm on my own, and I've really hurt myself here.
Yeah, and there was, and I think that's something I definitely struggled with, especially being at university. I think I've always been someone very independent. I've played for teams for my whole life where I've always been the younger player, and so you kind of have to be a bit more mature. You have to be a bit more independent, and I obviously need to get myself to training and things like that. So you always rely on just like yourself, and I think in that moment I had to rely on so many different people, but you don't want to be a burden. You don't want to be kind of a problem for other people. And for example, it was a Wednesday. Everyone was going out to sports night that evening, and I've got to get myself to hospital, get myself home, get myself showered. I couldn't walk, couldn't stand. My university shower was tiny. I couldn't even fit in it. So it was such a hard thing to be able to then have to try and be like, no, I don't need help. I don't need help. But actually, you do. And I think for me, for the first few weeks, I kind of was like, I can do this myself. I can make it there. I can crutch my way along. But I got the bus a couple of times to training or like uni because I didn't want to have to ask people for lifts or anything like that. And you become so isolated because you don't want this issue to be other people's, but you also don't want it to be a bigger thing than it is. And I think for me, like I said, I've had a lot of rolled ankles. I've had a lot of things in my life where you don't know the extent of it. And I think especially when I went to hospital and they kind of were like, yeah, it's not broken, you're fine, you don't even need a boot, here's some crutches. In that moment, you know what your body is like, but you also convince yourself that, oh, I don't like, if this isn't anything, I don't want other people to have to spend time looking after me, or you kind of feel slightly embarrassed if it doesn't come into anything. So I think in that moment it was quite, and for the next few weeks it was very isolating because you're at uni, you don't want anyone to kind of spend time looking after you. And my parents lived an hour away and they were amazing and came up so much to come and help, but again, I don't want them to have to feel burdened to come and look after me and everything like that. So it was like, you kind of, even just like cooking, you've got crutches, you
Yeah,
can't carry things, and it became very, you felt very dependent on other people. And for someone who absolutely hates that and is very independent, it was horrific. And you don't want to kind of dampen other people's university night out experience, like fun, with your kind of burden. And I think I then, once I did kind of figure out and get figure out what was going on, I tried to continue the way it had always been. So I did go out a lot, and I still went out with my crutches and my boot and everything. And I think to this day, I regret that so much, because I did so much more damage than I should have, because I was on it all the time and I was wandering around, and drinking alcohol is awful for your recovery and awful for your ankle and everything like that. But I think you kind of, once I'd lost my netball, my next thing was, okay, now I'm a uni student. I now need to do what uni students are doing, because otherwise I'm going to be sat at home with my foot up. But it wasn't the best thing for me. And now I kind of look back and I think, oh, so silly. But obviously I still loved it and had such a great uni experience with it all. But you're in a different situation to most people, and not everyone understands that. And you just, you don't want to be a burden, and you kind of shut yourself away and you try and pretend you can do it all, but you end up doing probably more damage to yourself
Yeah.
and other people than you would if you just asked for help.
I think that's it's so interesting to hear that. I think almost like striking at the core there of what so many people struggle with is acceptance. I think
Yeah.
it's that I think what I can kind of hear from that was that there was almost a big part of you that didn't want to kind of accept how it felt,
Hmm.
which is such a universal feeling that hang on, like I don't want to or I don't want help, but I probably need it. And I just mentioned that a very human response to that is to go, okay, I haven't got my netball. What else have I got for me? Which for you,
Yeah.
obviously, social person going out, spending time with your friends. And I think it's interesting there that in hindsight, I think you said there you kind of wish you kind of almost like accepted it more, kind of taking that step back and go, right, we can sort this
Yeah.
out. I think I wanted to touch on the diagnosis kind of aspect there because I'm wondering whether do you think there might be a link there between if you had a clear diagnosis initially, maybe that might have translated slightly, like it might have made it a bit easier because you say there you don't feel as much like a burden because you can go, well, I don't have any ligaments in my ankle.
Yeah.
So it'd be kind of interested to hear, like, did you think that kind of looking back, if you could give yourself maybe some advice before, like when it happened, would it be that how would that kind of acceptance fit into it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it does. I think it gives you peace of mind and it gives you clarity. And the similar thing happened with my knee. I kind of was running training and I felt pop, and I went to physio. They kind of felt it. I was told it was a tight hamstring. So I carried on running, carried on training, carried on playing for like probably a month before I thought, I can't
Wow,
walk. I'm in
yeah,
excruciating pain. And I can't even run it sometimes. Like I'm in so much pain, and eventually got that looked at, and I actually had a tear in my meniscus and like a really inflamed IT band. So I think you kind of, when you kind of go and you get told something's fine, you kind of believe it and you kind of make yourself think it is. And you don't then, like I said, you don't want to be when it then you actually get an MRI and everything's fine, or you've had your X-ray and everything's fine. You don't want to have been like, oh gosh, I've spent those few weeks not doing anything or recovering or resting.
yeah,
And then everyone's going to think, oh, well, she was fine the whole time, or she was just being boring, or things like that. So I think other people's like kind of opinions and on you as well kind of plays a factor, and what other people think,
yes,
which it shouldn't. And it's completely your, how you're feeling, how your body is, how you know you can recover. Um, but I think it was kind of an aspect of you. I didn't have any clarity. I didn't fully know. You don't know in that moment. All you know is my ankle's huge. It's really swollen. There's bruising everywhere. But I've been told I'm fine. So it's probably just another strain, like I've always had, another sprain that you've had in the past and you can walk it off. This one's just slightly worse than that. So I think it's even other people asking you, oh, what's wrong? And you're kind of in a boot or you're in a crutch, but you don't know. And all you can say is, I've had an x-ray and they told me I'm fine, but
yeah,
I think I'm not. So it's having that kind of clarity from someone else, even a physio, even anything like that. But obviously these sort of injuries, physio can't really tell you what's going on. You need the MRI, and because you've got to wait for so long for it, then get results, then have a consultation. It just delays your kind of
Hmm.
clarification and kind of acceptance that, okay, I am injured, because you spiral and you think, oh no, okay, today feels less painful, or the swelling's gone down, so, and then tomorrow it's back up. So it's such a hard, because it's a hidden injury. I think if I had a cut on my arm, I can tell it's there, I can tell when it's healing, it's fine. But it's hidden, and no one can kind of see it. And you see you're in a boot, but no one really knows what's happened or what's gone on or the extent of it. So you kind of, and when you don't even know, you kind of just look injured and you kind of feel injured, but you don't really know
yeah.
what's happened.
I agree. I think that's so interesting. It almost comes back to that control, where it's like if you know what's going on, you feel
Mm.
comfortable explaining it to other people. And I think kind of want to ask you, do you think social media has any impact on that kind of initial sense where they're not quite sure what's going on, but you don't want to be seen as weak because maybe your friends might be saying one thing, or because I know from my personal experience, I've seen people in their recovery maybe be further ahead than me, or like they seem okay. So I'm interested. Do you think social media has any impact on that kind of
Yeah,
aspect?
I think massively. I think in two ways. I think one in your social aspect because you kind of see everyone else living their life, enjoying their time, going to the gym. Like I'm very into the gym, very into running. So like a lot of my social media is around that, other people going and doing this. And I think when you see all of that happening, you kind of feel like, oh gosh, I'm so far behind, or you kind of think, oh, this is something that I could have done or I should be doing. So I'm going to try. And I think for me, I was also, again, like I said, I'm a little bit regretful to this point of what I tried to do. I would still go to the gym. I'd just be like, oh, I'll do upper body, or I can still do most weighted stuff in a boot, but maybe just not squats or things like that. So I still tried to do everything I could too early. And I think you kind of push yourself thinking, well, everyone else is doing it, so I don't want to be the only one not, and I don't want to miss out. And we used to do team gym sessions, and I used to go to the trainings, and I used to go to the stand on the wall and just pass against it. And I used to go to the gym, and I used to try and do everything and anything I could because I didn't want to be the one left out or kind of left behind. And especially when you are in a team environment and a team sport, it's so hard because it's even the social aspect of that. Everyone's bonding, everyone's getting on. So
Yes.
if you see that everyone's posting things together or going to the gym together, and that's what social media is now. You post your life and you see what's going on, that you want to be involved, no matter whether you're slightly incapacitated or kind of can't quite do it, you still want to. And I think on the other end of it as well, it's seeing other people's journeys, which is one thing I think is really great about what you're doing. And I think when people are injured, people post their progress and how they're getting on and how well they're doing. And I think they post the initial, this is where I got injured, and you only ever see the latter half of it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I was in a boot, I did a bit of a pull up, and now I'm here. And I think that timeline for most people looks so quick and so seamless and so easy. And it's not until you actually see there's actually a lot more challenge at the beginning. There's a lot more alone. There's a lot more tears. There's a lot more challenge. And it's not shown, which is something I think is really great that you're doing. It's so much more open and people can relate with that a lot more. And I think it isn't linear. Like you do have setbacks. And like I said, with my ankle and my knee, like still to this point, I run and I train and it swells because I didn't rehab my ankle well enough. And it was such a huge injury that I kind of was advised to maybe get the surgery and rehab it that way, but there was a choice not to, and I didn't. And to that point now, there's injuries and there's still a little bit of scar tissue that was there that hasn't properly healed. And so it's kind of, although you may look fine and you may be a few years later, there's always going to be a setback. And now because my ankle's weak, my knee's weak, my knee then went. So there's a lot of connections, and I think people don't show that and they portray that. They show that you got injured, you rehabbed, now look at me. There's never a, I've rehabbed.
Messy middle.
Yeah, there's so much in the middle that's so hidden and it's so difficult for people. And I think people don't quite realize that no one's journey is the same. And you think, oh, they also had an ankle. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. There's so many different things that can happen and so many different things in people's lives and what people have access to. I was so lucky that I had physio, acupuncture, ice baths, like all of that. I had so much, I had physio every single day where I was trying to do my bloody knee to wall, like things like that. But some people don't have access to that. So you don't know, my journey is going to be very different to other people's. So I think it's really great to be able to see and refreshing to see a slightly different side of it. And I think people think, like I said, people don't want to be vulnerable and people don't want to seem weak or anything like that. And I think injuries has got a negative connotation around it with that. So I think it's nice to actually have that kind of disregarded and actually be like, injuries happen. Actually,
Yeah.
what's better is how you deal with it and how you come out of it, no matter how long it takes, no matter how many setbacks you have. It's you're going to come
Agreed.
out of it.
Yeah.
It's how you deal with it.
I
It's the
think it's such.
journey.
I think injuries are such a like, I know you'll try to testify this, is that they're such a humbler, such a leveler. It really is like you're stripped almost bare bone back to your almost naked self, and they're like, this is what you've got. Like, how do we build from here? So I actually have a notification. I've only got a few minutes left of the recording. So what I'll say,
Yeah.
coming to the last question here, I think I'd love to kind of hear what are you most proud of in your recovery, and like kind of maybe into the idea that like when do things flip for you? Then always say what are you most proud of in your journey.
I think I'm most proud of how I've kind of come out of it. I think one thing with an injury was it made me realize that I've actually got a lot more than netball. I think my kind of idea around who I was before I kind of got injured was around sport. I mean, sport consumed so much of my life, and rightly so. I love it and I love playing a team sport, but you commit so much time to it and so much energy and so much effort to a sport for it to be taken away in one land, and it then takes away 1 second, kind of eliminates you for 12 months. And I think the way I dealt with it and the way I kind of experienced life as well after it, I was very proud of. And I think initially it's so difficult to kind of understand what's going on and how to figure out what to do. But then you kind of realize, okay, there's so much more to life as well. And you start kind of seeing who's there for you as well, like who's looking after you, who's always wanting to help you, who's coming round, who's driving you places. Like you kind of understand the value of what's important as well. And I think that's another aspect which has led me to having a job as well. Like you're not necessarily always going to have sport, so you also need something else. And I think that kind of gave me the drive to want to kind of experience more and dabble in more and juggle it all. I think I used to always think, yes, I'm only ever going to be a netballer. And now I'm like, yes, I want to be a netballer and I want to only ever be a netballer. But I also want something else to kind of fall back on, but also have when the times are tough and you do get injured, and then you've still got something to kind of keep you grounded and keep you there. Because I think otherwise you can spiral. So I think, yeah, I'm just proud of how I came out of it and what I've kind of learned from it.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think hearing there that this coming from, kind of athlete of your pedigree, this idea that you are so much more than your sport, and I think that is the biggest thing that I'm learning at the moment. And I think from what I've heard from maybe people who follow the account or people I've spoken to, that is their big thing. And ultimately it all comes back. And I think I can talk about identity and guilt and whatever, but the core thing seems to be this idea that I am more than the sport. I think I think that message you said there is going to help so many people. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for that. I think I'll actually call into you there as Zoom's telling me I've got 1 minute and 8 seconds left. So thank you
Okay,
so
cool.
much for taking the time to be here. So I really appreciate it. So
Of
thank you very
course. Thank
much.
you so much for having me, and it was lovely to chat.
Yes, well, awesome. Thank you very much.